Sunday gathering here, and it was it was good. A lot of news going on, a lot of good conversations, and welcome back. And let's see what there's somebody I've never noticed before raising their hand named Jeffrin Prince. Let's check out Jeffrin's bio. Oh, Jeffrin, you don't have a bio, my man. That's not good. But you have your Instagram account. Let's take a peek at his Instagram account, shall we, everybody? It's me, Jeffrey.
Let's all go there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he has no photos yet either. So Jeffrey, this is concerning. It looks rather trollish. So we're gonna exercise some caution because there's been some trollish like behaviors here in Clubhouse lately, and let you chill out there in the raise hand section and wait for you to update your bio. Maybe make a few. Oh, he disappeared. Well, better luck next time. And if you do want to join us on stage, that's not a problem at all. Just make sure you have a bio and links to your social accounts with actual social content on your social accounts of some kind, some followers maybe on your because there's a lot of hackers out there, folks, as you well know if you join us every day. There's no shortage of hacker headlines. And the more recent headlines is that these hackers are starting to get caught. Which is interesting, but I it's going to take a whole lot of catching and a whole lot of innovations to damper this incredible deluge of hacking going on, all of these ransoms and whatnot. So let's go ahead and jump into the headlines and see if we don't find another hacking headline or another Twitter beef with India or some more social commerce news, maybe Shopify's got some good headlines. There's these big meta narrative themes going on across the world.
Social media beef.
Yeah.
That's literally the room. Social media beef.
Yes, and there's the chip shortage issue. There's the EV vehicles. There's autonomous. There's AI issues with the military and with. It's amazing. There's actually what this is turning into is a sort of a very complicated Netflix series in audio format where we bounce between 12 different plot lines that all are interweaving together in very interesting ways, which either ends with us going to Mars or with the planet exploding due to the discovery of cold fusion. It's one or the other, and it's still unclear who the bad guy is and who the good guy is in this incredible drama. But one of the other big meta themes of du jour is, big tech being versus governments. But looking at the tech headlines around the world at this moment, judged on the number of articles and the most popular tweets, the biggest issue right now, and I will jump into the endless flow of tweets that people are sending in. Thank you for all of those. Is the following. Some power companies in Texas are remotely adjusting the smart thermostats of users enrolled in their energy saving programs to reduce strain on the power grids. That's the top news, and it's being covered by The Verge and Gizmodo, USA Today, Boy Genius Report, Apple Insider, Houston.com, The Daily Dot, Slate, and a whole mess of tweets because people are understandably a little bit peeved about the fact that they woke up sweating, according to this headline, that I'm now
tweeting. They just straight turn it off in California. They got to stop being pussies out there.
All you cowboys out there in Texas got to deal with the heat. So,
but then again, it only gets to about 70 to where I'm at. So
they're about double that. So the headline that I just tweeted from the Tech News Twitter account that you can see at TNATW, the headline is "Woke Up Sweating. Some Texans shocked to find their smart thermostats were raised remotely." Say what? Y'all did what to my thermostat? So, some said that they didn't know their thermostats were being accessed from afar until it was almost 80 degrees inside their homes. Houston, some neighbors in the Houston area said that their homes have been much warmer this week, even while they are running their air conditioners. Many of them claim some Someone has been turning up the temperature on their thermostats since the energy shortage began. The Electric Reliability Council of Texas asked Texans to turn up the thermostats on their thermostats this week. When Deer Park resident Brandon English got home from work on Wednesday, his house was hot. My wife had it cranked up. It had it cranked it down at 2:30 in the afternoon. English said it takes a long time for this house to get cool when it gets that hot. English's wife and their daughters decided to take the afternoon nap earlier in the day. They had been asleep long enough that the house had already gotten to 78 degrees, English said, so they woke up sweating without anyone touching it. They said their thermostat was changed while they were sleeping, making it their home unbearably hot. Well, was my daughter at that point of overheating? English said. She's 3 months old. They dehydrate very quickly. His wife received an alert on her phone soon after that. The family said the thermostat had been changed remotely, raising the temperature of their home during the 3-hour energy saving event. The
Someone
family.
took their right not to sweat, right?
I got a buddy. I got a buddy in medtech who studies sweat. He would have loved that info.
Um, the family's smart thermostat was installed a few years ago as part of a new home security package. Many smart thermostats can be enrolled in a program called Smart Savers Texas. It's operated by a company called Energy Hub. The agreement states that in exchange for an entry into sweepstakes, electric customers allow them to control their thermostats during periods of high energy demand. Energy Hub's list of its clients include TXU Energy, Centerpoint, and ERCOT. English said he unenrolled their thermostat as soon as he found out. I wouldn't want anybody else controlling my things for me, he said. A scroll through the Houston Reddit boards show English is not alone. Several others said they found out during this week's heat wave that their thermostats had been accessed and turned up remotely. English said his smart thermostat is convenient, but said it's not worth it. If someone else can manipulate this, I'm not for it. And Texas, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, something, something. George Bush himself, a resident of Houston, Texas. So this is just a little too ironic that Texas suffered severe power outages during this past winter, and now they're suffering power outages during the summer. The great state of Texas, ladies and gentlemen, the great state of Texas, with their
Well, in
own.
the winter, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tyler.
No, that I mean you can extrapolate from there.
Yeah, just really quick. So in the winter, I think it was the governor that said, well, our systems are equipped to handle summer temperatures, but not winter cold. So that was kind of the pass that was given for having an inefficient, disconnected system. And, I wonder what the alternative is. I mean, if people really focus on their individual comfort level, does that mean that there is a greater probability of rolling brownouts or blackouts? I mean, it would be really, really dangerous given the fact that we're technically just starting the summer season in the U.S. or the people in the U.S. So it gets hot in Texas, y'all.
Yeah, for real, with a quickness, and and I, it's just blowing my mind. But heaven forbid somebody brings some, big government it's just ironic. I mean, I love the additional insight in that article that they essentially got suckered into this by entering themselves into a sweepstakes.
That's the other part too. I mean, in California, we get told like, "Hey, look, we're gonna slash your power bill by like, so and so a month." But the catch is, we have access during a blackout event to just shut off your AC, and we kind of know that.
It's
Is
like,
it the 21st century version of Publishers Clearinghouse? Remember
yeah,
back in the 80s and 90s, you fill out all of those sweepstakes entry. And I mean, it really points out the purpose or the importance of reading the EULAs and the agreements.
well, that's the funny thing is like, we're going to be able to control your power in exchange for enrolling you in the chance to win a Ford Festiva or some, who knows what they could have, what the winning, dear journalist, dear tech journalists, Could we please find out what was the prize of this said sweepstakes? That would be a real interesting additional contextual insight into what these people thought they might be winning in exchange for giving up control of their thermostats.
Free Chick-fil-A's for a year.
All you can eat chicken wings. I know that sounds like a joke, but in knowing Texas, something tells me I'm not far off.
Beef brisket. But
Yeah.
real quickly, I think that's I think it's a genuine concern. I know that at universities where I've worked, we had to fight the credit card companies because they were offering free 6 packs of Pepsi for, students to sign up for
I
a
was
credit
gonna
card.
say that.
So, I mean, we had to literally push them off campus. So then, of course, they set up across the street, and started giving away like Domino's pizzas. But yeah, I think that sometimes people are so easily lured, particularly the people that are most vulnerable or, least informed.
Yeah. Yeah, in a weird way, yeah, I guess they might be taking advantage of people who lack critical thinking. And this is where the future of regulation will get very interesting when AIs start making our laws for us, as we covered a week or so ago. People, the way that the tech news works is, and it continues to evolve. It's an evolving process. And one of the cool recent evolutions is the Twitter account, which by the way, did we just break 3,000 followers? I'll bet we do right now as I read this, if I tell people to follow it. Yeah, we're at 2,992. So we're 8 shy of 3,000. So the Twitter account is at TNATW, and we tweet out all of the articles we discuss here. And while we discuss them, other people, namely Poppy and Cheryl and a lot of people in the audience and on stage, are finding other related articles that help us get an even deeper understanding of whatever it is we're talking about. And then we retweet those, and it enriches the conversation. And we find all of the best articles in real time, and we tweet them out in real time from the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. So I just tweeted out that Texas thermostat issue specifically around Houston. People waking up in a sweat, y'all. It ain't right. The government's making me sweat. And then you've got this one that I just tweeted out, which is really interesting, and something that we went into a deep dive on a week or two ago when El Salvador, quote unquote, legalized Bitcoin or made it the legal tender of El Salvador. The president appeared momentarily in Twitter Spaces to answer questions. And I was in that room along with, was it 22,000 other people, if I remember correctly? Anyway, he specifically called out that he was inspired by what he called Bitcoin Beach. And then we came into this room immediately following that room. We had our own little discussion about it. There was somebody from El Salvador who mentioned Bitcoin Beach and referred to it as El Zonte, which is the locals' name of that beach, the traditional name of that beach. And now there's an article in Bloomberg about Bitcoin Beach. What happened when an El Salvadorian surf town went full crypto? And I just tweeted this out so you can see it for yourself. An anonymous donor turned a tiny Pacific Coast town without a bank into the world's biggest Bitcoin experiment. Up next, the entire country, it says. And it's a very lengthy narrative style, like almost like a miniature book novella style article that you can read, but with photos from the beach and this little town. And essentially, long story short, they decided this little corner of El Salvador doesn't have banks, and the people are unbanked, and it's purely cash. And they decided, let's turn this into a little Bitcoin experiment and get all of the locals being able to exchange with each other and test out, kind of sandbox, no pun intended with the sand, the ability for everyone to exchange and pay each other through Bitcoin. And they did. And it attracted other Bitcoin aficionados who are eager to experiment in that kind of a sandbox. And that, due to the progress and the growth of that, that's what caught the president's attention, according to himself, that he was inspired by Bitcoin Beach to expand it nationally. And that's why the headline says, first Bitcoin Beach, next up, the whole nation of El Salvador. So it does, first of all, speak to the how geeks experimenting in one area in a sandbox could inspire, something like that. But looking into the essence of that experiment and the details, you'll have to read the article, of course. And there's always, it always comes down to people and individuals and their personalities. And no doubt there's always a drama embedded somewhere in that story. And it could be an interesting movie, honestly, like a dramatic documentary remake of some kind. Yeah, super interesting. El Zonte Beach, the surfer village in El Salvador, the Bitcoin beach, after an anonymous 2019 donation turned it into a controlled alt currency experiment. An anonymous donor turned up in a tiny Pacific town without a bank in the world's biggest Bitcoin experiment. So that's now on the Twitter account. And let's check. Did we break 3,000? Let's see. 2997. Someone's going to break 3,000 in the next 20 seconds. So, and it's a lot of fun. The Twitter, watching that Twitter account grow, and just like the Tech News Club. And people, by the way, are sending in tweets by simply tagging their tweets with our Twitter account, TNATW. And that allows us to see all of the tweets going on 24 hours a day from all around the world. And that's what has really become the engine of what's
And
making.
we're seeing commentary too now, right? So
Yep.
that's the place to have the chat too.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can reply to the tweets that we're tweeting out, of course, and people are doing that exactly. And Cal, you sent in a tweet since our last meeting about from CNBC about van life, which we've discussed once or twice here. And the headline from CNBC reads, as offices shut down from COVID, workers bought vans and hit the road. And the headline is van life. And van life is a very big, booming thing, actually. And you can see this for yourself in this article, where you'll get a little glimpse of what van life is all about. It's kind of a romanticized notion, but
and there's a photo in there, right?
Several.
And Akil has commented on the Twitter I saw this morning before I got on that he knows those people. So it's anyway.
Yeah. So from the article, it says a number of workers have used the freedom of working remotely during the pandemic to leave behind their sedentary housing and move full-time into vans. These remote workers drive from location to location in their homes, working off of internet hotspots in their vans and spreading their free time in nature and exploring new places. As vaccines roll out and states start to open up, some workers are returning to their offices, but for many of those who've adopted the van life, there's no end in sight to their life on the road. And it tells the story of Erica Horn, and it tells different stories of different individuals. And there's some photos of how these folks are doing and their budgets and how it's, way less expensive. And by the way, this is about to explode. It's already exploded, honestly. Like, it's really exploding.
I'm lusting after a van so bad because I have 3 kids under 4, and it's like we just want to go to the beach, and I want to set up with a laptop and let them have somewhere to crash when they get tired, and you can park for free near any California beach from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day. So it costs you nothing to do.
And you would be really amazed when you go on YouTube and look at van life. It's a huge rabbit hole in itself. And you will be shocked how good these van conversions are getting now. Truly incredibly stylish and very impressive, incredibly comfortable, and like really surprisingly comfortable. And now they're one of the popular things is they're becoming very solar powered with lithium batteries and solar panels on the roofs. And the internet thing is about to change in a very huge way in the next few months, with Starlink coming on board across the northern US and getting further south. Because once Starlink is on board, now you've got high-speed bandwidth anytime, anywhere. So wherever you pull over your van, and you could be many days deep into off the grid, assuming you buy a 4x4 van, but you don't have to. But even a regular van, if you go far off the grid, you will have, thanks to Elon Musk and SpaceX Starlink, you will have incredibly fast bandwidth, which will allow you to do full stream video calls on your. Some people build in, they install like a 50-inch flat screen TV on the inside of the wall next to their bed, and you can sit there and do video calls with it's like a 50-inch FaceTime call, and you feel like you're right in the middle of a meeting with that person. They're life size, larger than life, and with full bandwidth. And it's that itself is going to even remove one of the other friction points, which is the ability to connect. Although cell signals are pretty much everywhere, but now with Starlink, it's really going to change that. It's interesting.
Tyler,
Yep.
just real quick. I mean, I'm feeling so nostalgic because, we had, it wasn't a conversion van. Well, probably it was. It was a trans van in the 80s. And we weren't a camping family, but we would just kind of drive around with it. And I love the fact that someone had the wherewithal to kind of go back, dig back to the 80s and revamp it in this post-COVID or this COVID world, and modernize it for families and for people that want to be on the move, and then make it more efficient. And I mean, I love that. If I had a brood of kids, I would be the first in line to buy one of these things. I love it, love it, love it.
Yeah. And my own parents, just before I was born, did all 50 U.S. states. And, they're from California, so Southern California. They ended up in Vermont until the winter came around. And then apparently my dad didn't like the snow, so they came back to California. But it was a similar thing. It was a truck with a big camper shell on the back, and they lived out of that. And it's funny, and that was kind of popular at that moment in the mid 70s. And now there was a couple generations that didn't do that, and now it's funny that it's back in this new generation. Feel like they've invented something that my parents were very fond of. But now it's a whole different world now that you're connected all the time, and you can be doing social media, and it's have full streaming Netflix everywhere all the time, wherever you park. And it's interesting. But yeah, like you said, when you look at the budgets of these things, it does start to become an incredibly compelling financial alternative. Because, by the way, there was another twist to all of this, which was just before San Francisco turned into a shit show, and now everyone's fleeing. It's the second most fled city in America, by the way. Baltimore is number one. San Francisco is number two. Maybe because the mayor's telling people to dance for water. That might be part of it, or pray for water. Well, it's the combination of, there was a few interesting headlines last week. One was the viral video of someone going into a Walgreens with a trash bag, and loading up a trash bag full of stuff like they were Santa Claus, and strolling out on a bike unimpeded, just to highlight the lawlessness that's going on in the San Francisco area at the moment, which is, in fact, one of the main reasons that many people are leaving, with the kind of homelessness epidemic in the city centers, and uptick in crime, violent crime, especially against Asians. And now they're running out of water and electricity. And so, that's causing people to, by the way, flee to Texas, which by itself, as we just read, has having their own water and power issues. So I think that is part of what this van life thing is all about, is not being stuck on these grids, because
self-sufficiency. Yeah.
Exactly right. Sovereign and self-sufficiency, which I'll tell you, myself, having done this many years ago in a much bigger way, having my own water supply, sustainable water supply year round, and redundant water supply, more importantly, and food supply and energy supply, you do sleep. You do something happens, psychologically, emotionally, that you realize, once you fully have your all of your critical Maslow's pyramid needs met under your own control, and not being part of the grid, it brings a peace of mind that you didn't realize you didn't have previously. when you watch your own trees growing around you bearing fruit and with your own water, with your own power, and it all under your own control, yeah, you reach this whole new level of peace of mind that you didn't realize was there. And I think that a lot of people are starting to feel anxiety as a result of living on a grid that is not living up to its expectations, and that causes anxiety, like very, very real, actual anxiety. And that's why you're seeing people fleeing some cities, and van life is in some sense off grid. It's kind of temporary off grid. However, it's about to become a lot more literally off grid, like we mentioned the Starlink. But there's also Elon Musk, by the way, has been asked, as you can imagine, about the Cybertruck is about to come off the factory floors in Austin in the next few weeks and months. And he's already been asked, what about, because the Cybertruck, it was suggested, would have solar panels that cover the back of the truck. And he said, yeah, that's a great idea. And then the idea came out about a van, and that the van, the roof of the van is solar panels that actually cantilever out and make awnings. And then you've got this massive solar power array that fans out when you park and can collect an incredible amount of sunlight that could in fact power the van itself. Runs on batteries, and you could power the van. Now you don't even need you could self-power the van to some extent, and where you if you leave it parked at the beach all day, then you could drive it for a few hours at night or whatever. And then it gets really interesting, and then it's essentially water is your only concern at that point. Super, super interesting. So
I have a quick question for,
yeah, go ahead.
if I may. Interested to know what you drove, Tyler. For me, you said the large scale of this, and I'm interested to know if anybody would do that now with this van now.
I'm sorry, repeat the question if you could, Erica.
One, I was wondering about what you drove when you described it in a larger scale. Very curious. I've got several images in my head.
I have an island.
And
I don't have a van. And by the way, you can.
So everybody's going to Tyler's Island.
If you check my Twitter account in my bio, you'll see that I was island shopping, hopping yesterday with the Thai army, looking for other islands to buy, because I believe wholeheartedly, and I have reasons to believe this, that as that existential angst I was describing, of people feeling anxiety of living on a crumbling grid, the social grid, that they're going to start intuitively, some of them that have stronger survivalistic instincts are going to start seeking to take matters into their own hands. Maybe Texans notably, now that they realize this is not just a winter phenomena, it's a winter and summer phenomena, as we were just discussing. And I think people are going to start doing the calculations that I did 10 years ago, which is, okay, if I really want to be self-sufficient and I can make a living from anywhere due to the powers of the internet, what's the ultimate scenario? And if you really dive deep into that rabbit hole, it's like taking a PhD course. You can do a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or a PhD degree in that endeavor, and people go different depths into that, and we could do a deep dive room on it. But I would encourage you, if just to give you a little teaser, I have an ebook for sale in the spirit of or the early days of Clubhouse. But essentially, I would the first things to focus on is where the waterfall is going to be on the planet in the years to come. And you want to go to an area that's going to have more rain, not less. And by the way, you want to go to a country that is a major food exporter and not a food importer, and a country that has their own self-sufficient energy for the most part. Because, for example, California is a major food exporter. However, you need water to make that food. And we read a headline yesterday, and Bill Maher did a whole epic rant on his fantastic show about how the Californian almond farmers are taking up 80% of the water that they don't have anymore. And so California is quickly becoming unfarmable because they've run out of water. So it's no longer going to be a food exporter, right? Where you want to go somewhere that's a food exporter that's getting more water, not less. So it continues to be a major food exporter, because when civic unrest starts to unfold, being a major food exporter will be very much in your interest. You don't want to be a food importer when there's civil unrest, and you want to be a water. You want to make sure you've got a lot of water, and because water scarcity is also going to be the source of a lot of civil unrest as well. So you can understand the importance of having both of those. I would also encourage being part of a population that has dealt with civil unrest repeatedly in a peaceful manner. And now you're starting to understand why I'm in Thailand, because Thailand has suffered civil unrest repeatedly in a very peaceful way for a very long time. And they've culturally adapted to living off the grid permanently in a very self-sufficient way. They're farmers, and they know how to survive, and they don't get anxiety over the power going out at all. And they've learned to coexist in this very post-apocalyptic like scenario for a very long time. It's of no real concern to them. So where in the US, when the power goes out, shit hits the fan, y'all. I woke up in
May
a sweat. It's a headline news. I tell you
may
what, if that happens every day in Thailand, it's happened every day for 100 years. It's never once made it in the news. So go ahead, Lakeisha.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more color to the situation in Texas. So last week, the governor of Texas signed a bill whereby anyone could carry a gun without a license. So, I mean, there are many states where people
Great
can,
point.
conceal, carry a gun in their handbag or in the trunk of their car, or, and that's really no big deal. But it's a really big deal when the governor of a state said, you don't even need to have a license. I mean, so you could buy a handgun in the same way that you could buy a stick of gum. And they'll do that in Texas because their guns and their Bibles are closest to their hearts. I mean, I carry a Bible too, but still. I mean, I think that what just illustrated, Tyler, in terms of just the level of anxiety that some people will have from not being able to access utilities that they've always just assumed that they would have access to, it's going to get real in places like Texas.
Yeah. And so just one way to look at it. If you look at the map of Thailand, right? And nearly everybody's in Bangkok. Except everyone in Bangkok came from north of Bangkok. It's this huge farming country, and everyone in Bangkok came from either Isan or the farms north of Thailand, and they are the children of farmers, and their parents are still working on the farms. And if anything happens, those Bangkokers will inevitably, as they do anyways during holidays, go travel north back up to the farms to visit, mom and dad and grandpa and grandma, or Ita and Yai, as we call them here in Thailand. And down in the south here in the islands, first of all, there's banana trees and coconut trees and fruit trees of all kinds, papayas and everything growing everywhere, all the time, everywhere on public land, everywhere, all the time. So hence perhaps why there's such a low anxiety about when the power goes out. And by the way, the temperature never changes here. It's like 26 degrees, 365 days a year. All year round. And then you have to realize it's more than just that. You have peaceful neighbors. You want to be in a country that is essentially a combination of a democracy, a peaceful democracy that has a very effective government. You might look at which countries did well during COVID, managed COVID effectively, which, by the way, I wouldn't put the U.S. high on that list. Thailand did incredibly well on that list. Also has very peaceful neighbors that they coexist with very peacefully and don't have any beefs with at all and kind of any issues at all. That's very important, because when the shit really hits the fan, you're going to have neighboring countries that aren't friendly. Those things are going to exacerbate, and you're going to get serious migrations. And Thailand's kind of unique in that the military plays a very strong role in the government. I think that's a good thing during if we start heading into apocalyptic type scenarios, because they can take matters into their own hands very efficiently. Although they're a very peaceful military, they're not attacking anybody. That's not what the military's for here. The military's on the ground in a very efficient coordination team that makes things happen during emergencies. So it's that's just sort of how it works here. It's I think it's a lovely system, and if you can be very friendly with the government. And Thailand's kind of unique in that for example, they have what's called the VIP visa, where if you pay a rather substantial amount, you get, not as part of this visa, you get direct access to the ministers of Thailand as part of this visa. And that's kind of interesting, especially, and I kind of like the comfort of having direct contact with the ministers of my government and the army of the government. And anyway, you want to go to a place where when stuff hits the fan, that people aren't going to be mass immigrating to. They probably will mass immigrate to the major farmlands, and having a securable island. And if you do take the personal island route, you want an island that is not approachable by boats. You want an island with a coral reef around it, so that boats can't enter it. And then you make your own flat bottom boat, aluminum flat bottom boats that scrapes the bottom of the reef without sinking the boat. And you have the only flat bottom aluminum boat around that can enter your island. And there's then you want to militarize your island, and you can certainly do the dog thing. You can certainly do all kinds of you can spend a decade thinking about how you want to secure your island, but you also want to make it appear like a rock, a limestone rock without anything of value on it. You don't want to make yourself a target. You might take down the large flag that says free food and gold bricks hidden here, pirate chest hidden here. That I wouldn't put up a huge sign that announces that you have anything of value to any visible boat passing by. Not that it matters, because the boat won't be able to enter unless they happen to have your flat bottom aluminum bottom boat. So there's all kinds of it's again a very intense rabbit hole to dive down into, the prepper scenario. But there's different types of prepper scenarios. One is the nuclear war scenario, one is the famine scenario, one's the water shortage scenario, one's the mass climate change immigration scenario, the sea level scenario. And once you balance these all out, it's a fun rabbit hole to get into. We'll save that for another time. But people are sending in lots of headlines as usual. And this one from Poppy: Amazon comes for Netflix's throne with $8.45 billion MGM purchase, which we covered when it was rumors, and now it's being reported as fact. The ruthless war between the world's leading video-on-demand companies has reached a climax. Amazon has now purchased MGM. The ruthless war between the world's leading video-on-demand companies reaches a climax when Amazon acquires legendary Hollywood studio MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, in a deal worth $8.45 billion. And the big platforms are going to continue to acquire all of the content generators, which is what MGM Studios really is. It used to be the financial powerhouse. It is no longer that. Amazon and Netflix took over that throne, and now they're going to acquire all of the major content production facilities. And big tech has gobbled up Hollywood. That long story short, and they're in the process of gobbling the banks. They will then try to gobble the healthcare system and the education system, and eventually the governments, if left unchecked. And the governments now, in some sense, understand that, and that's why Wednesday this week there is when it's going to get real in the battle between big tech and big government in Washington D.C. when Washington is going to do all of their fun shenanigans around their 5 new bills to limit the power of big tech. Well, because they don't want to be overthrown and face a world where the tech companies are more powerful than they are, because those big tech companies might buy their own islands. And when they buy an island, they're not buying a little piece of limestone rock in the Gulf of Thailand. They're buying, Bali or Sumatra or Iceland, as they could easily do. And that would be very interesting if they did. And that's a whole other rabbit hole we will save for another time. Analysts say that the dominance of TSMC, which makes 92% of the world's most sophisticated semiconductor chips and 60% of chips used in cars, poses risks to the global economy. And here we are back to the existential threats of these grids that we live on. Because one company in Taipei, Taiwan, by the name of Taiwan Semiconductor, TSMC, makes 60%, 92% of the world's most important chips and 60% of the chips used in cars, which means your car company infrastructure, which, hello, Germany, your entire economy is based on your car industry, and those chips are coming from Taiwan, hence Germany. Your economy is based on Taiwan. Hello, dependence. You are on a global grid of sorts, and you are wildly dependent on the output of chips from Taiwan to support your car industry, which powers your economy. And now you see how countries face the same anxieties that individuals do when they wake up in a sweat in Houston, Texas. And the government of, the Berlin government is waking up in a sweat over their understanding that Taiwan is controlling the price of their chips for their car companies. So, interestingly, not surprisingly, there was a huge meeting, emergency meeting, literally within 24 hours. Joe Biden called in the car companies and all the chip manufacturer CEOs to meet at the White House to have a brainstorming session on how to minimize this dependence. And we now are seeing the headlines that reveal the outcome of that meeting, which is TSMC and Intel received billions of dollars in funding to build new plants, and so did TSMC to create new plants in the U.S. to minimize our geographic dependence on Taiwan. There's one big problem with that, as we read yesterday, that Mesa, Arizona, the fastest growing city in America, people think it's Austin. It's not. In fact, Seattle technically has the most import, not on a percentage basis, but just in net new feet arrivals. Mesa, Arizona is second, which on a percentage basis is by far the fastest growing, because they've got all of these new semiconductor factories and data centers, including Apple's new data center, which was one of the headlines we read about 7 hours ago. And the problem was they're running out of water and power. And now the city of Mesa, Arizona realizes, shit, we don't have enough power for these new factories that are being built. That's driving all these new people here. And they're even debating shutting off the power to the Apple data center, which is iCloud. You think the cloud is in the actual cloud. It's not. It's in Mesa, Arizona. And the citizen, the government, the local government of Mesa, Arizona is considering turning off the power to the cloud that powers your iCloud for your phone. And that's when stuff gets very interesting. Yet again, hello, back to this story of grid dependence, everybody. Hope you're having fun living on the grid as a domesticated circus animal, which, by the way, is a new phenomena. As the Thais well know, the Thais never really domesticated to live on the grid. And that's why, again, something you want to consider when you're thinking about where to move in your pursuit of becoming self-sovereign and autonomous. You might want to go and move to a place where the people never domesticated themselves, never joined the circus, and jumped in those those rusty cages, which are now making them sweat. So, TSMC, that's from the Wall Street Journal. Taiwan Semiconductor's dominance poses risks to the global economy amid geopolitical tensions and major chip shortages. Yes, indeed. That is the case, as everyone's waking up to realize. Here's an interesting one. An analyst from MIT Review, an analysis of the usage of COVID-19 tracking apps in 25 U.S. states, finds that only 13 of 25 U.S. states have enough usage to benefit from the exposure notification. So essentially, again, the grid is actually failing folks, and rather inept management of the data necessary to use this data in an effective way to do the COVID-19 contact tracing. And again, we turn it back to Thailand, who did non-digital contact tracing. They did it the old-fashioned way, with actual paper and community members knowing where everyone is all the time. We call it the coconut wire because every little community in Thailand is run verbally, and no foreigner can do nothing in Thailand with their entire neighborhood knowing about it and saying everything that they're doing all the time. And again, it's called the coconut wire, affectionately, because it works. Everyone it's a really amazing kind of hierarchy of everyone knowing everything going around with everyone in their neighborhood, in part because they never sequestered themselves into the corner of their homes on the social apps. They're still naturally social. Uh, they meet constantly and they talk constantly and they gossip constantly. And that means everyone knows what everyone's doing. Everyone knows who everyone's dating with and sleeping with and who got pregnant and who missed their period and who, I mean, this is how the world used to be, folks, until we all started living in our own little quarantined housing facilities. And
Tyler, was interesting that Paul Ark, who's a good friend of
yeah,
yours and
yeah,
Lakeisha's and
yeah,
a bunch of us here, was telling me in my early days, it was January, February when I joined Clubhouse, how he saw the kind of voice Clubhouse community thing being really popular with the Thai, and then it turned out that way, right? There was
yep,
huge rooms where
yeah,
people were using and getting into discussions and stuff. I think you're involved in some of them, or
yep,
Lakeisha is at least, and yeah, so it kind of it plays to what you're saying, like
yeah,
their natural instincts to be that kind of community,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
in a COVID situation, you can do that more globally.
yes. And it's really interesting to see. And I think that's partly why the Asian, to some extent, um, and it's a much more social community way of living where you don't, it's not so individualistic. Um, as a community, people kind of look after each other, take care of each other, communicate with each other. You create an extended. It's a tribe. It's a tribal. It's a very traditional human way of living. That for some reason, as people migrated north throughout Europe and up to it became much more singular and modular and individualistic in a way that the Thais have a hard time understanding. And similarly, I think the people who've lived and grown up in multi generations in those kind of nuclear families have a very hard time understanding the traditional ways, of living in Southeast Asia. But it's just that we could do the deep dive room on that some other day. Other big headlines happening at the moment is gosh, there's a whole bunch. I will pause because I have, as I normally do, I turn it over to see if there's here's the article again from NBC News. Drought-stricken communities in the US push back against data centers water usage. A typical data center uses same water per day as a city of about 40,000 people. The City Council of Mesa, Arizona approved the nearly $1 billion development of an enormous Apple data center, which you can see the photo of. I'll tweet this out again so that people can really get their eyes on this reality, because it's hard to understand the reality until you see it with your own eyes sometimes. But the Miss Duff is her name. The City Council of Mesa, Arizona approved this Apple warehouse, but keeping these rows of powerful computers in the data center from overheating requires 1.25 million gallons of water each day, a price that the vice mayor, Jen Duff, believes is too high. This has been the driest 12 months in over 126 years. We are on red alert, and I think data centers are irresponsible use of water. Well, you might have thought of that before you approved the $800 million development of that data center, Mrs. Duff. And now you're in a bit of a pickle. I understand you wanted the jobs, but you didn't realize you were trading in water for jobs. And now you don't got water to drink or shower with. And it's a real pickle. And this is symptomatic of this little vignette does speak to where we find ourselves in 2021 in an interesting way. In some parts, anyways. TSMC had a similar issue recently, and we are now reaching up against the boundaries of what does the Swedish guy in Stockholm, the gosh, he's an expert on this. Kind of expand. We're running up against the boundaries of our resources. I'll think of it in a second. Johan Rockström. What does he call his endeavors there? So one of the Swedes in stage will jump up and remind me in a minute. Anyway, interesting article, and thanks to whoever sent that in again. But I just want to pause to see if there's others. Somebody also just sent in one that we covered a week ago about scientists converting plastic bottles into vanilla flavoring, which sounds ridiculous. I'll tweet it out again, but we did read the article last time, and it does appear to be true that there's now, and this is perhaps the glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel, that they've figured out this. Researchers have developed a mutant enzymes to break down plastic bottles that we use for drinking water and soda and everything, what they call PET bottles, PET bottles, and it converts it into what they call vanillin, which is the taste that goes into vanilla in all of the foods that we eat, the vanilla flavoring. So maybe there is light at the end of the tunnel after all. So anyone on stage want to jump in with the headline? I'm going to look through the tweets and pick out all the
I
best
have a
tweets
quick
here.
question
I
for
have one.
George.
Yeah, go ahead.
So,
Ladies first. Yeah.
I know we've talked a lot about social commerce and side note. So in the 50 or so minutes that we've been together, I've ordered a few things. I was corresponding with one of my local boutique owners, and I have a couple of dresses that'll be delivered to me within the next 10 minutes. So that's just kind of an anecdote. But we use kind of the traditional Thai way of doing that. But over the weekend, I actually saw the buy now button in Facebook Messenger. So I was just curious as to whether other people in other countries have also seen that feature start to pop up.
I did an Instagram yesterday, but I'm in Thailand. It says products. It was a button that enabled you to see what products were in the image that would, if you clicked the product button, identify products, it would then make all of the products in the image clickable and purchasable.
Yeah, and what I saw, it was in Messenger. It was a new vendor that I hadn't used before, and there was a button that said complete your purchase in Messenger. Whereas normally I go to my bank, we make the transfer, and then and then she delivers it. But I just thought that was kind of interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how it rolls out. And I would imagine that places like Thailand that already has a culture of social commerce and already has a certain number of merchants who are buying more sponsored ads, etc. Perhaps, they will be the test markets for some of the new features and functionalities.
Somebody else said they had a headline they want to jump in with.
Yeah, that was me. So I don't know if you've gone through this headline already, but it says it's a headline from The Verge. It says leaked memo confirms OnePlus will become an Oppo sub brand.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we covered that when it was announced. OnePlus, co-founded by Carl Pei in Stockholm, a Chinese Swede, and he left the company about 6 months ago to start his new company called Nothing, and now his co-founder is merging OnePlus with Oppo, and Oppo is one of the very biggest Chinese mobile smartphone manufacturers, incredibly and super budget, by the way, might be the cheapest smartphone manufacturer in Asia. And then Plus One is more of a premium brand, and they, in fact, the specs on their phones kind of eclipse Apple's specs on their phones, and so the merger of those two is quite interesting. Or Oppo will be the parent, of course. It's a far bigger company than OnePlus is. OnePlus is no small potato smartphone manufacturer itself, but I think it's interesting. I think it'll essentially become the premium line of Oppo, and interesting to see how that'll evolve. Yeah.
They are already owned by the same company, right? BBK Electronics. I mean, it is the same company from like the beginning.
Yeah.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's absolutely true. Oppo and Vivo, and in fact, a range of company is a part of the super giant called BBK, which in Chinese stands for every step you go higher. And it's started by the legendary entrepreneur Duan Yongping, Mr. Duan. So Mr. Duan comes from very humble background and have this typical kind of like slow investment philosophy and a very strategic approach for everything. And they are also branching into a lot more ambitious fields, such as what they've always traditionally been strong in education, but now they are launching a new kind of education initiative, as well as more creative use of the technology as well as into display device. So yeah, BKK is actually the kind of umbrella company, and Oppo also is called something else. There's OnePlus, that's another mobile phone brand, also owned by the same giant family of amazing businesses.
Cool. Thank you for that, Kai. Poppy has been sharing a bunch of really interesting articles. One from The Economist that I just tweeted out that's about the loss of biodiversity poses as great a risk to humanity as climate change. And I've been hearing this a lot, and I need to do the deep dive on to really understand this as well, because the people who have gone down this rabbit hole are very really trying to raise the awareness on this issue. So if you have done the deep dive on that and you're in the audience, do jump up on stage and give us a crash course. It says human societies depend on healthy ecosystems. People consume their products in the shape of fish, meat, crops, timber, and fibers such as cotton and silk. Medicines may be directly harvested from the natural world or inspired by molecules and mechanisms found within it. The ecosystems that crops depend on are regulated by living things. Through photosynthesis, trees and other plants take in carbon and pump out oxygen. In doing so, they remove roughly 11 billion tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere each year. The services that ecosystems provide to humanity, like oxygen and food and whatnot, depend in turn on there being a diversity of living things. More than 75% of global food crops types, including coffee, cocoa, almonds, are pollinated by animals. The complex web underpinning every food chain and ecosystem means that the narrow range of species that humans eat and exploit can't be sustained without the existence of a much greater diversity of animals, plants, and bacteria. And now I'm starting to understand the concern. And the headline from The Economist again is the loss of biodiversity poses as great a risk to humanity as climate change. And I would love an expert to give us a sense of what is likely to be the most vulnerable link in that chain as the canary in the proverbial coal mine, so that we can get and no doubt it's already underway. And that would be interesting to see the data around it. I imagine that the bees dying somehow plays into this, as they allude to in the article about pollinating the flowers needed for the almond trees and etc. But let's do, if you know, due to the power of Clubhouse, somebody that we can ping in who's a biodiversity expert to really. Otherwise, I will save that as my own personal deep dive after we leave here. But we
Can
did
I
tweet that.
give a personal anecdote?
Yeah, go for it, Chris.
So Lakeisha grew up where I live now, and one of the things I love to observe is we're right at the beginning of the Central Valley, I think. Basically, Camarillo is like 600 feet below us. And what I see is cactus and the other trees have this constant battle. And when it's, obviously when it's really dry, the cactus take off, and when it's wetter, the trees take off, and it's just this constant battle. So, apparently that's what they're talking about, right? Is that like one species being selected more than another has these effects on the whole
Right.
world, essentially.
Yeah. Because we're building these massive cattle and chicken farms, which is in a very unnatural way, and that tips the ecosystem off kilter, out of balance, and has effects that we never intended. By the way, the soil apparently plays into this as well in an interesting way, because the natural management of the soil has been totally disrupted due to the incredibly large scale big ag approach to doing things as we are. And that's causing a severe imbalance of its own. So thank you for that little indicator there, Chris. It looks like the Mr. Olushola might be looking at his bio. He might know something about this. Olushola, is this your neck of the woods? Biodiversity, by chance?
Thailand, how are you doing?
Hello, good, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Sorry on the I'm actually working on the regenerative of the soil, which I think is aligned with the climate. Can you hear me, please?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yep, we can hear you. Oh, okay. There is a company in Indonesia called Saputra, which they are actually working on They are working on co-fertilizer, which is a biochar, which I think it's going to save the world in terms of food security, whereby we're looking at by 2050 there might be more scarcity of food in the world. So the company is called Sapotra in Indonesia.
Okay.
They have been patented. Yeah, last year July, just exactly a year, they got a patent from USA, which I think they are good in terms of the regenerative of the soil. Whereby I live in Nigeria, the method of us we using the organic way is the NPK fertilizer and the urea, which is just giving the nutrients, just only 3 elements, whereby we're taking 26 nutrients from the soil. So we're not living a better life, better continent, better world back to the unborn generations. So I think with the bow chow, it's another way we can actually leave a better planet to the unborn generation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Poppy just found a whole bunch of fantastic articles about a millimeter-sized robots controlled with magnetic fields that I just tweeted out. Scientists in Singapore have developed millimeter-sized robots. That's small, y'all. That are controlled with magnetic fields. These robots are capable of executing highly maneuverable and dexterous manipulation, and they could have a big impact in fields like biomedicine and manufacturing. And it says the miniature robots were created by embedding magnetic microparticles into biocompatible polymers, which are non-toxic materials to humans, which means they might be embeddable. Just a hint. The robots are programmed so that when magnetic fields are applied, they carry out their desired functionalities. The new technology built upon previous small-scale robots, and their new additions include an optimized ability to move in 6 degrees of freedom, which is translational movement along 3 spatial axes and rotational movement about those axes, roll, pitch, yaw, and angles, which means they're just incredibly controllable, long story short. And because of the soft materials in their construction, the robots can replicate mechanical qualities. For example, they can swim while another can grip, pick up, and place miniature objects precisely. And according to the professor, the major advancement heavily depends on the discovery of the third and final principal vector of the magnetic fields. Prior to this discovery, the applied magnetic field was only defined in terms of 2 principal vectors. But hello, everybody, they figured out the third. Here's the quote. My team sought to uncover the fundamental working principles of miniature robots that have 6 degrees of fluid emotions. Through this work, I'm trying to get to what could be the potential use case of these robots if they give us some indication of where we expect these things to be used. The miniature robots measure out the size of a grain of rice. The robots can be controlled remotely by an operator. In medicine, the miniature robots could reach certain vital organs like the brain, but there will need to be a lot more testing and tweaking before they can be applied in that way. Besides surgery, our robots may also be of value in biomedical applications, such as assembling lab-on-chip devices that can be used for clinical diagnostics by integrating several laboratory processes on a single chip. And with a jellyfish-inspired bot, the team controlled it to swim through a tiny opening barrier when suspended in water. This experiment demonstrated how the robots can negotiate barriers in dynamic and uncertain environments like your body, y'all. Meaning in the future, they could be used for targeting biomedical applications like surgery procedures. Yes, exactly. They're dancing around it, but they're going to embed these things in your body is what it comes down to. So it's an interesting article. We just tweeted that one out. And speaking of bots of a different kind, AI chatbots could benefit dementia patients. And thank you for this one, Poppy. New research published by the Journal of Medical Internet Research demonstrates how chatbots can benefit dementia patients and caregiver support. Despite this potential, the technology is still in its infancy, meaning there will need to be evidence-based chatbots that undergo end-user evaluation. Based on technologies like Alexa or Siri, the medical counterparts can interpret symptoms, suggest resources, and provide emotional support to caregivers. Now, pay close attention, everybody, because what they're saying is, essentially, Alexa and Siri could help you with dementia, and no doubt will likely be able to detect the early stages of dementia from yourself or your parents and loved ones. And now they're arguing might be able even to help them um, have benefits with dementia patients. Chatbots can be used for memory training or to stimulate recollections for patients suffering from dementias. Chatbots can provide advice and emotional support. The research, however, found that chatbot effectiveness is only as good as the medical knowledge used in programming, of course. And really interesting article, and it makes me imagine scenarios of people suffering from Alzheimer's, like my grandma did, and how this could have been used to help her. Maybe it knows what she has forgotten by constantly testing her, and working as a kind of secondary reminder and tester to help her remember things that she's in the process of forgetting. And what an interesting use case. I had not really considered that Siri and Alexa might be help grandma and anyone suffering from dementia in really interesting ways, but also in potentially dystopian ways of becoming an augmented extension of our own memory systems. And what happens when, in the same way that we've become dependent on Google for all kinds of things, when any piece of information is reachable with a single Google search, what happens when we by the way, this happened in human biological development over the ages. Biological evolutionists believe, that we are less stronger than chimps because we don't need to be. And in fact, our feet have evolved to cooperate with shoes in a way where most Westerners who, when they take off their shoes and start walking around other cultures who didn't adopt the shoes, understand just how evolved our fragile little feet have become dependent on shoes. And even the bone structures of our feet have evolved, and you can see this on the planet in cultures where they haven't adopted shoes widely. And you can imagine the same type of mental evolution might happen with Siri and Alexa working as an extension of our memories. It's a truly wild
Hey, Tyler.
conversation. Yes.
I was wondering, what do you think, who do you think would be putting the algorithm, like the doctors, the developers? I mean, I'm just so curious, right?
Mm-hmm.
It really depends. The solutions Siri is gonna give is gonna depend on how good the Siri is being programmed, right?
Yeah, or a Google Assistant. And to that point, Alexandra, who joins us regularly and might be on stage at the moment, I guess not. Where we reached out to X at Google, who works in the AI department, because it turns out she was the source of one of the big headlines related to this recently in the past 2 or 3 days, that Google's AI team is now dealing with different ways of categorizing people based on skin color. And it turns out she's the source of that research at Google. And so she's going to come in and help us understand the essence of what she's working on, which the tech journalists don't have a blog post is not the right context, and the Clubhouse room is the perfect context to speak with the innovator directly about what they're really working on. And so she's scheduled to come back tomorrow, 8 a.m. Pacific. Oh, so in the other time zone. So click on the title of the room to see when we meet in the other time zone. 4 p.m. UK, 7 a.m. Pacific, and it looks like she might come in 8 a.m. Pacific and give us an indication. But to answer your question, Messi, is that, of course, the Google Assistant team or Siri team or Alexa team will have team members that are tasked with a particular project around augmenting memory as a sort of app that these voice assistants will take on. And it'll start with remembering your friends' birthdays, no doubt. And then eventually you won't remember your friends' birthdays in the same way you don't remember their phone numbers now, because you don't need to. It's useless information at this point, right? And so eventually, when it starts telling you in the morning, oh, by the way, it's your sister's birthday, it'll only take a few years of that before you start thinking, well, my brain doesn't really need to hold on to that information anymore. We can let that data go because there's another source that's going to remind me. in the same way that everything you put in your calendar, for the most part, you don't burden yourself with remembering every upcoming meeting and every link to every Zoom call coming up, because you delegate out. When you start delegating your memory to apps, your brain says, I don't need to hold on to that data anymore. And so it'll be really interesting to see how much of our memory we can delegate to this new app of Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant. And I'm telling you right now, it's going to be a lot. A lot of our memory can be delegated to those apps. The question is, of course, training them to remind us at the right time so that we feel confident in delegating those memories. And yeah.
This is seriously happening to me now, right? I mean, like literally, I'm so curious about the research on this. I've had like 3 startups here in Oxford pitch me something, just talk about this this whole space, like coming out of the research labs, mostly working around Alzheimer's as a use case, and prompting people. But then I've been thinking about myself. And over the last 3-4 years, I've really started to remember a lot less. And I got myself tested for early signs of, and I haven't had any of those flags come up. So it's literally the fact that I'm getting assistance that I'm doing less and less, remembering, right? And this big space, yeah.
Mm. Mm.
I was watching a documentary on CNN, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and then they said that there were some researchers doing a study on nuns' brain, because apparently nuns do a lot of unique things. They go out and try to help a lot of people who have many challenges that's completely different from everyday kind of activity. And they thought that their brain, the nuns were donating when they die, has really a key in understanding, because apparently their Alzheimer's is completely different from the general population. And they said one of the reasons those nuns were kind of immune from having Alzheimer's and dementia is because of the types of unique activities that they do, and they were doing that type of research. So I was just wondering, um, was our brain better off doing everyday some kind of unique things, or delegating them, or I don't know. This is just something that I saw in the documentary, and it's quite interesting. Yeah, thank you. This is
Sure.
Mesa Arizona speaking.
So, a couple of here's an interesting point to follow up on, and thank you to who sent this in. People are a new phenomena as well is something called deep fakes, and this is exploding as we speak, which is the ability to construct fake images. And more importantly, fake videos with even fake audio, where you could essentially, and we've seen really incredibly compelling examples of Tom Cruise saying things to a camera that Tom Cruise clearly wouldn't say, and Obama and etc. And these things are improving by the day, and within a year or two, they will be, able to construct. You'll be able to create any celebrity or person to say anything you want in an incredibly convincing way. And you can imagine, you think misinformation on YouTube and Facebook and social media is bad today? Well, imagine how troublesome this will be when anyone can create, a video of anyone saying anything. So it's a very concerning development. But there's simultaneous to that countermeasures being created that we read headlines about recently. But now there's a new headline which says that deep fakes, and I just tweeted this out from the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW, and no doubt we've passed 3,000 followers now. Thank you. Deep fakes could soon make it into geography, and says the concerns over deep fakes are starting to expand into other areas such as geographical information science, which is called GIS, which is a very well-known field of which pioneered by a company called ESRI out of the LA area of California, which is the biggest geodata company in the world, and have sponsored my events over the years. So it's an amazing, amazing company that you likely haven't heard of, but they power the software that nearly every city in the US and many cities around the world uses to develop their cities. Like every mailbox, every street light, everything, the city has an app, a desktop app that Esri makes that allows them to know every pipe under every sidewalk of the entire city. And so the multi layers of the city are this geodata that Esri has is absolutely mind blowing, and they can do incredible things with data that even Google cannot do. It's one of the most interesting lunch conversations you'll ever have, and maybe I'll bring in Miles and somebody from Esri to share one of those kind of conversations. But anyway, this GIS, Geographic Information Science, as they call it, which was coined by the founder of Esri, Jack Dangerman, back in the 60s. GIS is now coming to terms with deep fakes, what they call fake geography. And they paint the concept, for example, of somebody making fake satellite images, which would then be basically algorithms are now scanning the planet and scanning databases of images to find out where trees are growing or they're not, or where all kinds of different things are happening. And if people are creating fake geographic images, altered geographic images, the algorithms will be sucking in false data and will result in concerning outcomes that we're just starting to understand. And this is a relatively new thing. So it's an interesting article. Yeah.
Tyler, I tweeted actually an article by Wired on the same thing, like at the end of May. And they talk about, how they could, like, it basically, it could be used to, like AI techniques, like it says researchers applied AI techniques to make portions of Seattle look more like Beijing. Such imagery could mislead governments or spread misinformation online, right? And they like talk about all these different scenarios of how it could be used to, for example, mislead regarding, where they have like detention camps or things like that, or like how it could be used by all these countries that are trying to manipulate, what they're doing. So it's like, there's been some articles on this for a bit of time already as well.
They talk about colors of roofs, where the colors in the real images were uniform, while those in the altered image were not. The team also found that fake satellite images were less colorful. How they are able to detect these deep fake geo images. And Geo AI uses machine learning to extract and analyze geospatial data. However, Geo AI could also be used to fake GPS signals, locational information on social media, fabricate photographs of geographic environments, and for a wide array of other dangerous applications. Here's the quote: "We need to keep all of this in accordance with ethics, but at the same time, researchers also need to pay attention and find a way to differentiate or identify these fake images. With a lot of data sets, these images can look real to the human eye." As they said, your eye is not able to understand what is real geographic imagery and satellite images and what has been manipulated satellite imagery. And that's of great concern to people who use these algorithms to interpret the data in important decision-making, situations. So that's a really interesting situation I had not considered. Here's an interesting one that we just tweeted out, that Xiaomi, one of the world's biggest smartphone manufacturers, and might be the biggest now, actually. Just for context, it certainly feels that way here in Asia. Xiaomi working on technology that can charge your smartphone with sound. Xiaomi is reportedly working on a new charging technology after which you may not need a charger adapter at all. Xiaomi is working on new charging technology. It will use sound to charge smartphones in the future. New tech still far from public rollout. Xiaomi is reportedly working on a new charging technology. There is no doubt that the way we charge smartphones has changed a lot in the last few years. More companies are now focused on charging wireless charging technology. But if things go as planned, Xiaomi tech may revolutionize the way smartphones are charged. According to a new report, Xiaomi has applied for a patent with the state agency China National Intellectual Property Administration, which suggests that the smartphone maker has been working on a charging technology that can use sound to charge your devices. The new charging technology will reportedly work on two components: a sound collection device, a plurality of energy conversion devices, and a power conversion device. Xiaomi's power conversion device will convert environmental vibrations to mechanical vibration, which will then be converted into alternating current. The power
It's a
conversion.
fancy way of saying it's a speaker
Yes.
or a
Yeah,
microphone.
a reverse speaker, which is a microphone, exactly. The power conversion device will convert AC into DC. If Xiaomi is actually able to roll out this tech, we will not need charging cables or bricks anymore. However, it sounds too ambitious for now and will take a while before the tech is actually ready for public use. And Chris and I can both confirm that this is a little still far out on the horizon. Xiaomi has been really active when it comes to charging tech. We already know that it's working on a 200 watt fast charging solution, and that's a lot of wattage for charging a phone, everybody. 20 watt is a strong charger. A 200 watt will likely explode the phone if you tried to do that at home and not in a lab, which may debut on a flagship phone later this year. Also, it had unveiled their Air Charge technology, which can be used to wirelessly charge multiple devices at the same time. But yeah, Xiaomi is certainly pushing hard on the battery charging front of things. That's for sure.
I think that 200 watt one is designed to be a longer range one, so you don't have to have it within an inch of the charging plate like you do with current wireless solutions. So I think it's designed that you keep it in your pocket. And it actually, I'm reading a little bit further into that, and it's saying it's the phase control array composes of 144 antennas that they can manipulate and aim. So I think the idea for them is going to be you keep your phone in your pocket and it can track you through the room and adjust the beamform array to actually charge it, into your pocket basically from a distance. Be interesting to see how far that distance is, but I think that's probably why it's maybe 200 watts. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kind of also, people charge their smart watches, and there's a report today that Apple Watch accessory maker called Restream has just raised $25 million for an Apple Watch wristband, which has a camera in it. And you can now see this. I will tweet this out so you can, by the way, you can now do selfies and FaceTime calls with your Apple Watch, essentially. And you got to see what this looks like, how this camera is built into the wristband. And by the way, Facebook's new smartwatch is also expected to have multiple cameras, perhaps in the very same way. So this might be a way to get a glimpse of what the future wristband smart camera will look like. And it's not what I thought it would look like. It's quite interesting how you could do a FaceTime call on your watch. It's truly wild. You got to see the photo that I just tweeted out from the Tech News Twitter account. And the first line of the article says, last week, word got out that Facebook was taking another big step into first-party hardware with a planned launch of its own smartwatch. The most intriguing part of the report was indeed the inclusion of not one, but two cameras. Other wearable makers have flirted with video and images on wrist-worn devices, but the feature is far from mainstream. Industry leader Apple certainly doesn't need to be rushed into the idea, so Wristcam went and did it for them with the launch of a band sporting its own camera capable of shooting 4K images and 1080p video. The product launched late last year following a successful crowdfunding campaign, and now you can see it. It shows a lady doing her own either selfie or FaceTime call with her Apple Watch. It's truly kind of interesting. And also very interesting is some... I think Poppy found the Tesla Cybertruck photovoltaic bed cover, which can be added to increase the usable range of the truck, making a solar panel out of the back of the truck, which you can now see. Apparently, there's been, according to a patent filed by Tesla with the U.S. Patent Office. And there's even a photo rendering of it, a solar-powered cover for the back of the Cybertruck, which would be super cool. And
the
then,
car accessory business is going to be huge, right? With the EVs, it's basically what the most profitable part of any of the consumer electronics retailers has been the accessories, right? You sell the base product, and then you attach the accessories. That's the entire model. Now you've got the EVs, and you start retailing EVs, and then you get obviously the varying ones like the trucks and then the cars and then all the paraphernalia that people are going to create around it. This is the next big, if you like, retailing opportunity. It's
Well,
just huge.
not just physical accessories either. Once you've gotten to the point of like a Tesla with the software in the screen, you're talking about software accessories. So that ties into that as well, Cal.
Then you have to help people figure out how it all works together, right? So that's your car squad, right? It's big.
Yep.
Heard it here, folks. Best Buy going into Car Squad.
Breaking news. Speaking of breaking news, ladies and gentlemen, the Wall Street Journal has a headline, and my goodness, why didn't we hear of this sooner? This is the headline. The world relies on one chip maker in Taiwan, leaving everyone vulnerable, is the headline. I wonder who they're talking
No
about.
way.
Yeah.
Would that be TS? I can't remember.
Yeah, let me see. It says Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company's dominance poses risk to the global economy amid geopolitical tensions and major chip shortages. The company makes almost all of the world's most sophisticated chips and many of the simpler ones too. They're in billions of products with built-in electronics, including iPhones, personal computers, and cars, all without any obvious sign they came from TSMC. Oh my God, that's sinister. Ladies and gentlemen, let's wake up. Apparently, there's a chip shortage or something. Something chips shortage, something. A lot of devices, COVID. Why didn't anyone tell us? Thank you, Wall Street Journal.
I think that's the breaking news. They just realized it.
Absolutely breaking news, everybody. There's a global chip shortage, according to the Wall Street Journal. And apparently there's one major company involved called TSMC out of Taiwan. You heard it here first from the Wall Street Journal about 3 months late.
As we've been the golden age of chips over, Tyler? The golden age of chips?
The golden age of chip investment is coming to an end. And we're having a little laugh at the Wall Street Journal's expense because we've been covering that story from the very earliest possible indicators of the first indications that there was a chip shortage from the very first episode of Tech News Around the World going back 3 months ago. But it's good to see that Uncle Bobby and Aunt Betty are now going to understand what we understand. And no doubt they'll be raising the issue at your next company picnic or barbecue, and you can let them know the real story. If you've been following us at Tech News Around the World each day, your source for blowing everybody's mind at your company picnic and company barbecues. Gives you a little.
What kind of chips? Chips and dip?
Yeah. So thank you to whoever sent that one in. And here's an interesting one that you can mention at your next company barbecue or picnic. 90% of NFTs will be worthless in 3 to 5 years, according to Coinbase co-founder. Non-fungible tokens is a huge topic, and no doubt will be raised at your next company picnic. And you, as the geek, will be asked how you feel about NFTs, and you can now tell them that Coinbase, which is the largest exchange for crypto, which had their huge IPO a month or two ago, that Coinbase's co-founder is now claiming and warning that 90% of NFTs will be worthless in 3 to 5 years, which is quite a strong statement coming from an incredibly pro-crypto voice as co-founder of Coinbase. So it says the NFTs have taken the art market and its many adjacent industries by storm this year, and its extremely volatile trading activities make it still too early to say how it's going to play out. But according to one of the earliest purveyors of cryptocurrencies, the vast majorities of NFTs in the market today will be worthless in just a few years. In an interview with Bloomberg TV this week, Coinbase co-founder Fred Ehrsam drew parallels between the rise of cryptocurrencies and the dot-com boom of the 90s. Here's the quote: "I will go so far as to say 90% of NFTs produced, they probably will have little to no value in 3 to 5 years," he said. "You could say the same thing about early internet companies of the late 90s. People are going to try all sorts of things. There will be millions and millions of cryptocurrencies and crypto assets, just like there were millions and millions of websites. Most of them didn't work out," he explained. And the world doesn't change overnight, but you can see the seeds of exponential growth all occurring already, he said. "I do think we will live in a future where for us to coordinate, we won't need these centralized platforms today. That's already true for the financial services in that you can be your own bank. You don't need a central institution to hold your money anymore." And there he starts alluding to the other incredibly hot conversation and debate around centralized and decentralized, what we call DeFi and CeFi, decentralized finance and centralized finance, and that's a huge friction.
We love that topic. We love it.
Do we
Hey,
not?
Tyler.
Yes.
It's
Oh
Emily.
boy. Oh,
Oh
of
no,
course
I'm
it
actually
is.
going to talk. I'm going to talk
Who
about the
else?
NFT one.
Who else would it be?
Who
Go ahead, Ame.
else? Well, actually, good morning. I hope everyone had a wonderful Father's Day yesterday. For those that celebrated, I'm not sure if it's globally the same day, but I
It's
hope
not.
every father had a
Yeah.
wonderful day, regardless, and for animals included. But I'm just going to touch on the NFT one
Yeah.
because drum roll, please.
Okay.
I do not disagree with that.
Right.
I actually agree with that statement
Mm-hmm.
because I work with creators and I was in the fashion industry with artists and like Conan Belding, IPG, Ogilvy and Mather, and all these artists and designers and graphic designers and illustrators. The part of it that I'm getting really present to, back from the first NFT that was actually in 2015, is what he's saying is accurate because the NFT, let's just look at the creator economy for a moment. It's like with anything, you need a community, you need to have art that's structured. Many of these individuals are creatives that don't understand the processes that are surrounding how to do a contract for art, how to do a commission, how to understand to value your artwork. You know, not everyone is a Basquiat. Do you know what I'm saying? Not everyone is a Warhol. And it's unfortunate to say that, but the reality is that. So a fraction of these people will succeed, these artists will succeed, but of the creator and the collector and the art gallery and the manager, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think you're going to cut out a lot of that fat as well. And I think the model of the process for creators and artists to be able to sell and commission their work will go onto the, a non-fungible token experience, but they will still have to build a community. They will still have to get themselves known. They will still have to do the work. And the challenge there and the problem to solve is, how does a creator that's an HSP, highly sensitive person, an introvert, someone that may not understand how to write contracts, may not understand their own value and worth for their product, and to be in a sea of other creators where it's really collectors collect based on their own taste. So this is where I think it's going to be very interesting to see the new businesses that open up. And I'm saying that because I'm cheekily in conversation to open one as well with someone from Miami. So it's a very interesting dynamic because we're seeing it, because we've come from marketing, sales, and art gallery and progressive and milestone billing. So we understand the creative industry. So now what we're trying to see is, what is the disruption for the business that will be growing out of that? So we're looking at the opportunity on the business side to navigate and help all these artists and creators really tell their story effectively so that a collector would want it.
Very good. I got a few hot new headlines to jump into. Anyone else have anything on the crypto space while we're on the topic, real quick? There's the
I
China.
like to
Yeah.
I like to chime in as well.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
agree with Victoria.
Uh-huh.
Yes, 90% of new industry would not do as well as they would anticipate, because Number one, it is new. Number two, people are experimenting. There will be undoubtedly a lot of speculation and potential. That's always true. And but the ones who will do well will be the one who would put the effort to understand both the business world and the technology world as well as
Is that just
artists.
me?
Can you hear
Yeah.
him?
No, Kai, sorry, your signal's not working at the
Art
moment. Yeah.
dealership world, and also work very hard to rise with the time, and that's the way entrepreneur
Sorry, Kai, we can't hear you well.
Kai's in the
Kai's
Matrix.
breaking up.
That's all right.
while the rest
I
Kai,
work.
can you go and look for a
Kai,
place with a better signal, and then you come back to talk to us again? I think you have a lot to share.
Yeah, hold on, Kai. We'll come back to you in a few minutes. Is Cal on, here? I muted him, but he's still speaking, even though I muted him. It's really strange. I guess I have to move him to the audience. Hold on.
Yeah, Carl is not on stage now, right?
No, I just moved Kai to the audience because
Okay.
he can't hear our warning to him. Hopefully, we can explain to him what happened.
Okay.
Okay, so Poppy found another article about the beach in El Salvador with other photos of people buying Coca-Cola bottles, and this little beach in El Salvador, with Bitcoin. It's quite an interesting another article on that point that we started a few hours ago on. And here are some of the interesting articles I found in the past few minutes. Scientists using new technology to detect signatures of life remotely. It could be a milestone on the path to detecting life on other planets. Scientists under the leadership of University of Bern in Switzerland are using a whole new style of technologies to detect life on other planets, which no doubt is useful now that we've got all of this UFO phenomena, in the mainstream media these days. So hopefully this could be put to some good practical use in the near term. And speaking of cameras, here's an article that just came out that we may have our first look at Ring's new car cam. So I just tweeted it out. You can see it for yourself. It's quite interesting looking. And it says, we may have gotten our first look at Ring's dash cam, which, of course, would be used. It's a huge market, these dash cam cars. And this camera looks into your car, not out at the road, although why don't they make both? They're both becoming quite popular. But I guess it functions as a security device. And you can look at the article to see this device. But it says the car cam was originally announced by Amazon in September, as it was a dashboard mounted device which would record both sides, inside and outside. Okay, that's good. For $200. However, the support article about the car cam that's been posted on Ring's website says that the camera attaches to the windshield as well. The design as depicted does not seem like it could allow for that. If it comes apart into two pieces or extends, the support article confirms many of the features that were teased when Amazon announced it last September, but reveals several new ones as well. It states that the camera will plug into your car's OBD2 port and that a subscription service isn't required for the camera, as it saves videos locally, which you can access via Wi-Fi and the Ring app. And
that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I was
hold
going
on
to
a
say
second.
the data would kill you.
Yeah, the data transferage, yeah. Other interesting article, just on that Bitcoin topic for a minute, somebody sent in a photo that I just retweeted of these Bitcoin ATMs heading to El Salvador. And we should ping in Frank from Cefello, which pioneered the Bitcoin.
That was Tyler. That was someone found it. Thank you to who found it, because I was looking for it like crazy. It was probably Poppy.
Yeah.
I was looking for that because I mentioned that they're en route. There's a company sending a bunch of Bitcoin ATMs to El Salvador, and they were kind of announcing it, but I couldn't find the article for you. So thank you to
Yeah.
whoever found it, because I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And you can see what they're blue and orange. They look like a regular ATM. But I guess you put in cash and you get out Bitcoin. As we launched at my event in Stockholm in 2013. We had a Bitcoin, Europe's first Bitcoin ATM live on stage, and the head of one of the largest banks was the first user on stage of the event. And it was Frank from Safello, that was their first big PR event, and that was a lot of fun to do that. We had a lot of journalists turn out for that. Yeah, but
So this Bitcoin ATM, you bring your bank cash card and then go to the ATM machine to get Bitcoin, or how does it work?
We don't know. They're not all the same. There's different companies making different Bitcoin machines, and they don't all work the same. So it depends on which
Okay, so you
machine
don't really need a bank card then.
It depends on which machine you're talking about.
Okay, because someone was mentioning that El Salvador 70% have no bank, right?
That's right. So I imagine these are cash machines. In the case of the ones going to El Salvador, almost certainly will accept cash because, as you said, a lot of people don't have bank cards.
Or would they allow you to like link up to your wallet or something and pay out your money from your crypto wallet, maybe somehow?
All a bunch of maybes because there's no details provided.
Or maybe from telco. Yeah.
Maybe. Everything anyone suggests is maybe it reads your mind. It just gives out free money. We don't know because there's no details provided. So we can only
that
ask
would be
questions.
Nice, free money.
No answers, only questions at this point. So nobody knows. Only there's a photo. We do know it's blue and orange. That we do know. Everything else we don't know. And
your friend who run this company will be able to know the options, right?
No, he knows the ones that he built that are in Sweden, not the ones going to El Salvador. So, Forbes reporting that the massive record-breaking heat wave reveals how AI self-driving cars could provide some cooling relief. How hot is it? That's the kind of question that you probably don't want to be asked when you are broiling in the existing heat wave that has engulfed much of the country. This latest mega heat scorcher is said to be the worst of its kind since the century began. There is the old familiar line that it is hot enough to fry an egg on the street. Turns out this is usually a false claim since the required temperature needed to be about 140 to 158 degrees Fahrenheit to apparently fry an egg. And rarely does the pavement on the street particularly rise to that esteemed temperature. But in some locales, such as Las Vegas, there are current reports that the asphalt is supposedly a sizzling 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Get those eggs ready if you'd like some street cooked eggs. When it gets this hot, most people smartly opt to try and remain inside and avoid going outside if possible. By staying inside, you presumably have some semblance of shade and hopefully also some cooling fans or its equivalent to keep you cool. Stepping outside can be a shock. Please be careful out there. This has added the twist that you might not be thinking about and for which, until you live in such hot temperatures, you might not intuitively realize is an additional endangering factor. That hospitals are indicating that there is a rising tide of people suffering from heat stroke. In addition, may go for a walk and find themselves suddenly collapsing from acute dehydration. And the article goes on and on and on about how cars, these autonomous cars with their advanced cooling systems, will potentially lower the propensity for people having heat strokes, which this is a tech journalist. I don't know if I can. He claims he's the world's renowned expert on AI and machine learning. Interesting article.
So people out on their walk would benefit from a car ride.
Yes, it's journalists going to journalism in 2021 and write silly articles. Self-driving cars and coping with heat waves. The AI does the driving. I guess essentially, this is a real stretch, everybody. Here's a use case. You feel a heat wave coming on, and you call your self-driving car to come save your dumbass with the air conditioning on, potentially. Is this the new... oh boy, we're reaching new levels of...
We're really
Tyler,
scraping the bottom
Tyler,
of the barrel.
this is a pretty interesting one because Arizona is like, God's waiting room. I mean, the average age in certain parts of Arizona is quite elderly because that's where they go to retire. Same thing with in some parts of Florida. So I would be really interested to see how that could even potentially pan out because you do have a lot of elderly people that live out there because of the temperature.
Right. So apparently, this person who wrote this piece says one aspect to immediately discuss entails the fact that AIs involved in today's AI driving systems are not sentient. In other words, the AI is altogether a collective of computer-based programming and algorithms, and most assuredly not able to reason in the same manner as humans can. Why this added emphasis about AI not being sentient? Because I want to underscore that when discussing the role of AI driving systems, I'm not ascribing human qualities to the AI. With that clarification, you can envision that the AI driving system won't natively somehow know about the facets of driving, and all of that entails will need to be programmed. Let's drive into the myriad of aspects that can come into play on this topic. Okay, now let's go ahead and indulge this nimwit here for a second. First, he says, it is believed by many pundits that self-driving cars will be a lot less costly to use than human-driven cars. Yes, that is true. But I think he's going to try and debate this by saying the notion is that the price per mile that you might be paying to use human-driven ride-sharing vehicles is going to be substantially lower if you use self-driving cars instead. A key part of this lowered cost is that there's no labor required to drive the car. Yeah, exactly. And then he says, for the sake of society, it is presumed that we might be heading towards a mobility for all era. Yes. Those that today cannot afford to use a car for transit will now be able to do so. Interesting point. Yeah, they're called buses. The assumption today, the assumption is also that there will be gobs and gobs of self-driving cars roaming all around, being available at a moment's notice to provide a requested ride. Here's how this ties in with the heat wave topic. Here it goes. Imagine that someone is in their home and they lack any semblance of cooling capabilities, like people in Texas, for example, who the power company adjusts their thermostat on their behalf. They don't have air conditioning in their house or apartment. The inside of their home has gotten superheated due to the overwhelming heat wave taking place. They are becoming anxious at the heat and can feel that they are starting to succumb to it. One possibility of providing temporary relief would be to send them a self-driving car as a form of refrigerator on wheels, as it were. The self-driving car is dispatched to the person's home. The autonomous vehicle has automatically engaged the air conditioning inside the vehicle to ensure that the interior is cool. Self-driving cars will likely be outfitted with Alexa or Siri. As such, the AI driving system might emit a message to the passengers to forewarn them about the door handles as possibly being too hot. This guy's an idiot. I'm sorry to waste your time, everybody. This is just... it's driving me nuts. I'm going to tweet it out so you can read it yourself. Have a good laugh.
Well, at least you gave him a shot, Tyler.
I gave him a shot.
You didn't give him
You
full
gave him
justice,
enough
right?
time.
But I think it could really make an impact in healthcare delivery, because I remember a few years ago I was in a meeting with the Cleveland Clinic around big data, and some of the physicians there were talking about how they prescribe different types of treatment based on whether someone lives alone or whether they have access to transportation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So without talking about the door handles being too hot, and I think that it could really help provide more options with people who would normally have, limited access to a fuller range of medical interventions.
Okay, but here's the bigger issue. Let's give me 2 minutes here. This is a geek. A self-described AI machine learning guru person proposing that these autonomous cars... He does agree that in the future autonomous cars will be roaming all around the cities and we'll be able to jump in them, that's going to happen. He agrees with that. Okay. And they will be air conditioned. Okay, great. Yeah, most likely. And thankfully the air conditioning systems in those cars will not be controlled by the government of Texas. Yes, that's a safe assumption. And so they will actually be cooling. Okay, so far so good. Now, would not the phone in your pocket in the future, or your smart watch, which does have a body temperature reader in the very near future, by the way, and a heart rate monitor and everything else, be able to sense, you're in a hot environment. Let's call you a self-driving car to cool your ass down, because for whatever reason, the room that you're in is not able to cool you down. Although in a smart home scenario, your smartwatch should be able to detect. But my point I want to make here is this is what happens when geeks are left to solve these problems that are very real world problems, and they assume everything can be solved with a new technology. And the picture he's painting is the grid you're living on, right? This Texan who's in a hot house, right? That Texan is living in a faulty grid. That grid itself is technology, right? And the first layer of technology failed you. Well, no problem, Uncle Joe. We're just going to apply more technology in the form of a car that's cool to come save you, because the first degree of technology couldn't. And that in itself is a really interesting thought experiment, that the technologies that we have today got us in trouble, and we need these geeks to double down and come up with even more creative ways to resolve the failures of the first degree of failure.
Find more nails to hit with the hammer, right?
Right.
When your only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Yes. So Tyler, can you summarize the issue in Texas, because I'm not following it? Is it that the grid? So I don't understand. Can't you pay more to cool your house if it's higher rates of power? Is the thermostat controlled by the state, and
correct?
Can't you just use a Nest or something, a Nest, and have your own independent and pay a higher tariff if you wanted?
Yes.
Isn't that the simplest solution? Pay more to get cooling.
Yes, exactly. However, these smart thermostats that people installed, they had the option. They were tricked in a user license agreement into participating in a sweepstakes that might give them a lifetime supply of Pop-Tarts. And they said, yeah, hell yeah, put me in that lottery to potentially win a lifetime supply of Diet Coke or Pop-Tarts or whatever the sweepstakes was for. And they didn't read the fine print. And in the fine print, in exchange for participating in this 1 in a million chance, to have a lifetime supply of chicken wings, they signed themselves up for the power company to control their thermostat. Not the state, but the power company. But in Texas, the state does kind of control its own grid and might have a bit of influence in these power companies. So the point is these power companies are now adjusting these thermostats as they are able to do, because the homeowner gave them the right to do that in exchange for a 1 in 1,000 chance of winning a lifetime supply of Pop-Tarts and chicken wings. So the point is that Americans are stupid. They don't have critical thinking skills. They don't read agreements that they sign up to, and now they're waking up sweating because and shocked and horrified that they've opted into something they didn't understand they opted into. And I'd say that's a really interesting metaphor for the living on the grid in itself. People have opted into becoming a circus animal, a domesticated circus animal, and they've opted into that without actually reading the fine print as to what that could the long-term effects so I think what's going to start happening is, as a result of this, people are going to start realizing, I don't want to be on this grid, because the people running it are the same people who ran COVID and the vaccine programs, and they are inept. And I'm not putting my life in the hands of these idiots. No more. Thank you very much. How do I get off of this Titanic? And that's why you're seeing a lot of people leaving San Francisco, because the crime is going crazy. And it's the same, infrastructure that's responsible for, all of these homeless camps that are popping up everywhere. And it's getting concerning. And some people are voting with their feet and fleeing. And that's why San Francisco is the second most fled city in America at the moment. Number one being Baltimore. And yeah, so I think, of course, America, we already know that the number one city they're going to is Seattle on a percentage basis. Number two is Mesa, Arizona. which now has its own problems of water shortages. And I think the next stage will be people realizing, screw it. Now that we've got Starlink, we can work remotely. Why am I even? And by the way, they're soon going to realize if they, as Americans, if they left America, they would also save $35,000 a year on their tax bill. They get an instant $100,000 discount on their taxes every year, which at a 35% tax rate is a in your pocket savings of $35,000 a year, essentially $100 a day they would save by living outside of the continental US. And then once they figure that out, they'll realize they're paying $100 a day to wake up in the US. And they could save that by living outside the US. And that $100 goes very far living outside of the US in places like Thailand. So you're essentially being paid to live in Thailand. So as soon as they figure that out and they realize that Thailand actually has far better internet than America does, that's when things will get very interesting. Cal?
Yeah, no. What I'm just thinking here is that there's an underlying Mabwana's question there, and also just how there's an underlying assumption that the world's infrastructure has to be built with U.S. orthodoxy, right? And this is in retail, in energy supply, in everything. And the biggest advantage the world has now is because that orthodoxy, because of the new technology and all the opportunities and all the things that we've been discussing, particularly today around the grid and off the grid and etc. These they have an advantage because they have no underlying assumptions sometimes, because they're building the infrastructure out from scratch in some places, or they're using new technology to build the infrastructure. So they haven't got the existing orthodoxy to build in. So I think you have this new opportunities to build decentralized grids and decentralized living abilities, and keeping communities together, right, in many of these countries, in African countries and Asian countries. And it's such a great opportunity for the rest of the world if you look at it from this lens.
Yeah, Cal, I was putting together a few thinking threads that Tyler brought up in a week or so ago. The boom in smart cities and some of the smart money is going to smart cities. I'm wondering if we're going to see in the near future smart cities pop up where they lure people to come in from these places like the U.S. There could be an interesting opportunity now to build a city from the ground up with all these new technologies and promise not to like artificially raise your thermostat, or if it gets to if the power issue. But of course, the power might be even better resolved in this new smart city model. And so, yeah, I'm wondering if we're going to start seeing like smart cities start luring talent into those, and then particularly if you start packaging it with like attracting the right people. But when I say right people, I mean like entrepreneurs who can help build out the tech ecosystem. That could be very interesting.
The caveat that I would add that makes Texas particularly vulnerable within the US, however, is that the state of Texas kind of removed itself from the rest of the US grid. So I think that's why we're seeing, these catastrophic, energy events take place in Texas in both the winter and the summer, because, there's a deep-seated culture within Texas that, Texans, it's like, don't mess with Texas. I think that's their unofficial state motto, right? So in many ways, they have piloted this concept of being off of the US grid, and they've left their system and the people that live in that state particularly vulnerable. That's not to say that it could not take place, but I think what it shows that it highlights the importance of having backup systems or other types of catch-alls, so that when the major system fails, people are not left in the hot or in the cold.
Just one thing back on that, Lakeisha, if I'm thinking about that, they may have exited the system in that sense, or come out of it as an experiment, but with the orthodoxy of the existing system. So they didn't go into the new technologies. They weren't thinking in the ways that some of these people in Thailand and other places are now thinking. They didn't have new thinking. So it was just, we'll exit and then we'll create these opportunities on the basis of what we currently understand living in the US, right? And so everything else stays the same, and we'll now just get off the system.
I would ping you, but only Tyler has the sound effects. Absolutely.
A few quick articles here, because we're going to hold on one second. There's Cheryl just sent an article from a photo from Tokyo, of the electric vehicles, the autonomous electric vehicles that are the internal shuttle bus system that they've developed for the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Village in games. And you can now see the photo of these autonomous electric shuttle bus system that Tokyo is putting in place for all the athletes and people attending the Olympics. It's very cool little glimpse of the future there. And it's, by the way, the same identical autonomous electric vehicles that we've been using in Stockholm, in Kista, for many, many years. Literally the exact same one. And also this, the ones that I've seen, it's identical to the ones that Angela Merkel stepped off of in Germany recently in her photo op. Here's a headline: Google's healthcare data sharing partnership is a problem. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Apparently, Google's going into medical, and their data sharing partnership's a problem. I mean, who could have seen this coming? That's the headline. Just tweeted it out. Thank you to whoever tweeted it in on May 26th. So about 3 weeks ago, Google and HCA Healthcare, a national hospital chain, announced a data sharing partnership that will provide the internet giant with access to a host of patient records and real-time medical information. Gee, I wonder why they want that sweet, juicy data. But what is being cast by both companies as a win for improved patient treatments and outcomes is hardly a victory for consumers. Get out of here. What? Why didn't anyone tell us? Google has a dark history of exploiting personal data for profit. Going back to at least Project Nightingale, Google has collected and monetized sensitive patient data from millions of Americans. What? The HCA agreement will put an enormous quantity of new patient data into Google's hands, and some have already pointed out how similar the HCA agreement looks to data sharing agreements that powered Project Nightingale. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, Google's a data company. They're coming after your sweet, juicy data, your medical data, your education data. We've been talking about this every day. I sound like a goddamn broken record at this point, and now the journalists are catching on 3 weeks later. So, by the way, now your friends at your company picnic have now learned what we've been talking about for 3 weeks. The word is out on Main Street that Google is getting into healthcare, and that this is not what it's cracked up to be, as this journalist correctly is pointing out. I'll give them credit. Tom Kelly from VentureBeat, you got it right. Google's a data company, and it's not what it appears to be. They are going for that sweet, juicy consumer medical data, and they're going to monetize the shit out of it. And that's why they're getting into medical. You're exactly right, Tom. You got it right, Tom. Good on you, Tom Kelly. It's not about making better health for you. It's about more valuable, juicy data that powers their ad networks and everything else. And now the word's out, and you can tell your friends at your company picnic and barbecue that you've been talking about it for 3 weeks now at Tech News Around the World, and they should probably come in and listen to if they want to know what's going on 3 weeks before the mainstream tech journalists do. So thank you to whoever sent that in. And here's this one is a big one, and we've touched on this briefly last week. And this from Reuters about the Australia-China spat spotlights World Trade Organization limits. And it says that the Australian government is finally taking China to the World Trade Organization over Beijing's triple-digit duties on wine exports. And you heard me mention this, and this article just came out a few hours ago, and that China has blocked Australian wine, essentially to punish them for saying that the Uyghurs is a genocide. And so Australia's wine industry is crippled. New Zealand wine industry booming. 60 Minutes went over to New Zealand, spoke to the booming wine companies there, spoke to the Australian wine companies. You should watch it. It's enthralling. And you're going to see the actual victims and victors of both of this. And then the journalist even goes so far as to confront the Prime Minister of New Zealand about how they are unwilling to join the rest of the G7 in criticizing China's treatment of Uyghurs, because it benefits very notably the fact that they are a farming and a huge part of their economy is servicing China in terms of cheese and dairy and wine. And the journalist asks the prime minister very directly, is your tongue tied? Are you unable to criticize China? And she flatly says no. And then it gives an explanation as to how they have their own way of dealing with it there in New Zealand. Anyway, so the article now coming out today is that Australia is not taking this laying down. They're going to take this to the World Trade Organization of how China's now trading unfairly. And the Chinese embassy in Australia recently leaked a list of 14 grievances, none of which had anything to do with trade, much less trade of wine. However, Australia's call for international inquiry into the origins of the coronavirus and other actions have resulted in trade barriers against a wide swath of Australian products. And we just tweeted that article out so you can see it yourself, but it's going to get very interesting because trade shouldn't be based on, Australia asking about the real origins of COVID, and, blocking trade based on these kinds of things is not normally how, international trade works. And the World Trade Organization has to be brought in as mom and dad to settle the argument. And it's going to be very interesting. And now you know why China has put so much backing into the World Health Organization and the World Trade Organization and all of these, this mom and dad who's going to decide who's the bad kid in this scenario. To be determined. Very, very interesting development indeed. And there's a ton of others, but I have guests who just arrived unannounced that I must attend to. So we'll pause and join again in 6 hours for another riveting, everybody. And
Thank you so much.
Yep, see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.